You need to highlight anything?
I don't think
No?
so.
Okay.
I'm really nervous.
Oh, you're all right.
You'll be
You-
fine. Just
Ariel,
check it out.
yeah, I mean, the way she
Okay,
asks
you know,
questions
as we
and guides you through
look
it.
up shift, we identify.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us live. I'm Ariel, Vaughn with MSBCoach, and today we are talking about how to get shift done. And I'm so excited today. We have Michelle Braden and Leslie Craig to discuss this topic a little bit more. So how about you guys just introduce yourselves for us first?
Absolutely. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for Facebook Live. My name is Michelle Braden, and I am the president and CEO here of MSBCoach, and proud team member. Yes.
Hi, I'm Leslie Craig. I am the Executive Administrative Assistant and Project Manager here at MSBCoach, and I am new to the team. I started in December, so I'm so grateful to be a part of this team and to be learning so much with my colleagues here.
And we are grateful to have her. She's already been a huge asset. That's a whole nother Facebook Live.
Yes. So today we're talking about get shift done. And so first of all, I think we should just define what shift is. And according to the dictionary, shift is to move or cause to move from one place to another, especially over a small distance, or a slight change in position, direction, or tendency. So Michelle, tell us a little bit more, what shift means to you.
Okay. Well, I love that you read that definition. By the way, when we think about the definition of shift, it's slight changes. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes when we're looking at making change in life, we think of these huge, drastic changes, and they become these big, hairy, audacious goals. And what equates the success of a big, hairy, audacious goal is the ability to break it down into small goals where we are getting shift done, where we are mm-hmm. shifting into small areas at a time. And before we started this Facebook Live, we were talking a little bit about that sometimes it's just the slightest tweaks mm-hmm. that make a difference, the slightest perspective change that makes a difference. And that's really what we're focusing on today, are what are the shifts, what are the things that we can do that will make a difference in mm-hmm. our lives. So shift to me can mean a whole lot of things. It can be things that are personal or things that are professional, but where we want to make some slight tweaks or some slight changes. So that's what it means to me, but I would love to hear what it means to each of you guys.
Yeah.
For me, I was thinking about get shift done in terms of exercise and in terms of physical training. And when you are at the gym or engaging with a personal trainer, oftentimes you can be doing the exercise on your own, and you can just do hundreds of reps of the same thing, and it just feels like it's not making any difference. If you have a trainer and someone who's outside of your perspective, who knows this really well, they can look at your position and just make the slightest little change, and all of a sudden you start having major impacts in your ability to do more reps or get stronger and faster, and it doesn't have to be big, but just slightly moving your position a little bit can be huge.
And we think about that even in other sports, in golf, and then transitioning that metaphor to life and leadership. And what are some of the slight changes that we can make in our leadership, that we can make with our teams, that we can make in our personal life that bring tremendous amounts of change, so we can live into that definition of insanity of doing the same thing and expecting different results, doing those same reps over and over again, or we can work with someone else to bring higher levels of awareness and what shifts we need to make, and all of a sudden we start seeing a whole different level of results.
Yeah. But I just love that example that you shared, Leslie, because when you think of shift, yes, it's internally, and with exercising, you're like, oh, I want to start exercising to make a change, but then having an outside perspective too. So that just shows that shift is internal, but also outside sources
External.
can help as well. Yeah. So definitely great definitions of what shift is. And so if you've been following along with us, last year we were doing our Facebook Lives monthly, and this year we're doing them quarterly. And so the theme for this first quarter of the year is to get shift done. So I would just love to hear, we've been pretty excited about this theme around here, so I would just love to hear from you, Michelle, like what the inspiration behind the theme was.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it just is thinking, it started very personally, of thinking about when I want to make my own changes and what that requires, and those intentional shifts. And then of course all these years of working with clients through executive coaching, and recognizing the more successful they are when we break it down and they're working on and identifying and taking ownership of those shifts that they want to make. So for me personally, doing that is where I see the greatest results, and working with the clients, helping them to see the greatest results that they want, what they want to achieve, is through doing the shift. And then we thought that it was pretty catchy saying get shift done, so that was also a big part of it too.
Yeah, definitely. And then so you started to kind of mention about working with clients and that shift aspect. So just talking about the programs that we have here at MSBCoach, how does shift play into some of those programs and even our coaching model that we have?
Yeah. So we have, before, when we first started the organization now, almost 11 years ago, when you look at our coaching model is identify, shift, create. So shift has been a part of our foundation, since we began. And so we believe that we first need to identify what it is that we want to work on. And sometimes that identification is something that we work on, that we have identified ourselves. Sometimes we get that outside feedback, whether that is informally, like someone sharing feedback with us, or formally through 360 evaluations or other assessments. But then working on that identification of, now, where does the shift need to take place? And some shift is easier than others. When we're talking about shift in really taking a deep look at our values, or our belief systems, or our own confirmation biases, or our own, we all have them, our own prejudices, in all different aspects. And sometimes we look at things that were ingrained in us from childhood, and we say, I'm seeing this show up, and I don't want to show up in that way anymore. How do I make that shift for that to happen? So that's where, when we look at the coaching model, that shift comes in. And then the next is create. So where am I going to create a pathway out? Where am I going to be a creator of something that will come after this? And that's where the support and accountability really helps. But we first got to identify that ourselves. If someone else identifies it for us, we rarely will own it.
Oh yeah.
That,
like it's,
right?
It's tough when you realize it on your own, but then to have someone else, call you out on it or something, it's even harder.
We've
to
got to
move
want
forward.
it, right?
Yeah.
We've got to want the shift. It can't be that someone else wants it for us. Yeah.
Right. Definitely. And then, so we have a new class that we've been doing with lots of our clients about proactive conversations, and conversations can be proactive or reactive.
Right.
So let's talk about a little bit of that, and how it relates to shift, and even identifying those things that need to change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and I'm glad if we can just pause for a second there. Ariel, I'm glad that you brought up some of our programs, because really one of the things we were talking about was which of our programs involves shift. And when you look at it, wherever we are, each of the programs, there is some sort of shift involved if you are desiring to be more successful in this area. And in almost all of our sessions, we will say, if everything's important, then nothing is important.
Right.
So work through identifying what one or two things in this program, and this is not coaching, by the way, this is when we do, sessions, whether they're customized sessions or, part of a keynote or part of a retreat, but what is most important to you right now in life. So there can be 30 people or 2,000 people in the room, and they may all have something different that stood out to them based on where they are in life and where they want to make shift.
Yeah.
Shortly after we started the business, MSBCoach, I met David Emerald actually at a International Coaching Federation meeting in Richmond, Virginia, and he had written his book, The Power of TED. And so we already had our coaching model in place that identify, shift, create, but I was so thrilled with how that aligned with our coaching model, because what he did was he created, well, he didn't create the drama triangle, but he created the empowerment triangle. Which is basically a way out of the drama triangle. So it's all about shifting from being a victim, a persecutor, or a rescuer to being a creator. So there's the creation word, a coach or a challenger. So we've used a lot of that, and I know you've been part of that class. So I feel like all of our classes help to bring shift about, but some of them focus even more on shift. So the empowerment dynamic using David Emerald's work through The Power of TED is one of those places, and then the other is one of our newest classes that you just brought up, which is that proactive conversations class, which we are really loving and enjoying, and I think our clients are too, because talk about seeing instant shift. Like it's something that people can grab a hold of and really begin to use.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, you said instant shift, because sometimes shift, you might be aware of it right away, but it will take time to really implement and stuff. So that's pretty cool that they're able to use these new tools right away.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's that we instantly recognize that we can use it. It may take a little longer to begin to create it as a new way of being.
Right.
And a new way of doing things. But it's one of those things where you see it and you get it and you're like, oh, I can use this. And then when we start using it, it is one of those things I really do believe, and I wanted to get some feedback. I know, Leslie, you've been in one of the classes. I feel like it's something, and from the feedback we're getting from clients, that when they do use it, they see shift right away, even in other people, and how they respond to them.
Yeah,
which is
awesome.
Very meaningful. So it's as long as I'm intentional to use it, I'm seeing shift in me and in the responses that I'm getting from others.
Yeah, and Michelle, to break in, I attended that class with you in February, and one of the most impactful things about that for me was one of our clients pulled you aside in between sessions and said, I just use this right now.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that.
That there was a situation, and I literally just walked out of your class and had to confront and have this conversation with someone, and I literally just put this into practice, and it was so meaningful, and came back to tell you that of so excited, this made such a difference in the 5 minutes that I've been out of this class. So, and we really saw, within these couple classes that we've conducted so far, how immediate, that shift is happening.
And we've used the theme, so we've titled the class Proactive Conversations, but we also talk about it as conversational oxygen, because it is literally when we start using these techniques and we shift to use them, and it really isn't drastic shift, it's intentional shift. But you'll see we're going to go through the Fabulous Five here in just a second. It's not drastic shift, but it brings drastic results. So as Leslie was sharing, we had a client come back that had participated and was very excited, saying, I immediately applied some of these things, and we didn't even solicit that. So that was, thank you for bringing that up. I had forgotten about that.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, you just mentioned the Fabulous Five, so let's kind of go through that so people can, kind of get a better idea of what we're talking about when we
Okay.
talk about this proactive conversation
Sure.
and conversational oxygen. So the Fabulous Five, I guess we can just go through them kind of one by one a little
Sure,
bit.
okay.
Yeah, so the first one, listen between the lines and create trust.
Yeah. So what is that?
Yeah.
Well, so number one, the foundational element of these proactive conversations, how do we get ahead of the curve? Because I think there's some great models out there for having difficult conversations, crucial conversations, some really meaningful stuff out there, and those are reactive tools. Which is still good because we're going to need to have a lot of reactive conversations. But we thought, what if you get on the front end of this? How do you have proactive conversations before we have to have the reactive? We need to learn both skills. So feeling like the foundational element of that and believing, and from research, is learning how to listen with an open mind. So one of the first things that we do is we practice listening with our head, with our heart, with our eyes, and with our ears. And so we do exercises to how do I tap into all of those different aspects, because we will have a tendency to typically only listen with our head, but also listening with with our heart, and what are my eyes seeing. And we even talk a little bit about the gut. What am I feeling in my gut, and learning how to tune into some of those, and that's why we call that one listening between the lines.
Yeah. Definitely. I just love that it's all aspects of, looking for all those cues and, just taking your listening skills like a step further to really understand.
Yeah. And when we listen like that, that's why we use the word building trust. When we really listen, we are building trust. I mean, there's so much that happens. One of the things we do in just our listening class, we'll go around the room and we ask people, who is the greatest listener in your life and what did that mean to you? And when we first started doing that, we weren't trying to evoke tears, but I could not believe how many people, as they would share about the most meaningful listener in their life, would get teary-eyed, because it's so meaningful for people to have someone that genuinely, without judgment and with an open mind and with curiosity, just listens to them. It's a huge gift. And Leslie, feel free to, because you've been through this program too with us, so feel free to jump in at any time with what each of these steps meant to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I one of my own personal experiences in a way that I was immediately able to make shift happen is after, a long day of classes with Michelle and all that came with that. It was so meaningful and impactful, but I had to go home and I had to parent. I have 3 kiddos, and, my oldest one is kind of in the throes of pre-tween angst a little bit right now, and, some of the confusing aspects of middle school. And she came to me that night after I had gotten home and, was having some struggles and needed to talk to me about that. And, as a mother, your immediate impulse is to try and fix it. You just want to make it better for your kids. You want to make it easier. And, before this conversation, before this class that I had just taken, I probably would have immediately been, sweetie, what can I do? What is it you need from me? How do I make it better? How do I fix it? Let's try this, let's try that, And instead, I was able to immediately kind of put those same questions and those same listening skills, and to notice that, she really needed to be held. As a 12-year-old, she doesn't always express the need to be physically held and to cuddle with her mom a little bit, but she needed that from me. So I was able to hold her and to validate her feelings, and then to ask some really impactful questions that I had just learned. And instead of, suggesting to her, I said, well, what is it that you need from me? How can I support you? What does the ideal situation look like? What would you like to see happen? Some of these questions, instead of telling her the answer or trying to fix it. And, that I think immediately made her feel more calm and centered and secure in our relationship, and in talking to me about some of the things she was experiencing.
And that's, Leslie, one of the things that one of the many things I love so much about this course and how it brings about shift and helping us get shift, is that we can apply these skills personally or professionally. And I can tell the story of my daughter's quite a bit older than yours. I remember, being on the phone with her, and she was sharing a problem with me, and I didn't practice my skills. I jumped right in and started rescuing, to use the drama triangle, or trying to figure out how to rescue. And she said, "Mom, I don't need you to solve this for me."
Yeah.
And I backed up because I knew she didn't. So I made the shift. Instead of getting defensive, I made the shift, and I said, went to our powerful questions, which is we're going to talk about next.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you need?
Yeah.
And moved back into listening rather than trying to solve or rescue or fix. And so it's powerful. And again, you guys hear this and you realize, like, oh, that's not that hard, because it's shift. Remember, shift is making small changes that bring about great impact. So that's the first, is that learning to listen between the lines with all of our senses and not just with our head.
Yeah. That's just such a great example. Thank you for sharing something so personal, and I mean, it's so relatable too, because I can just understand, like, wanting to help right away, but then, like, shifting your mindset and, just listening and practicing that skill, and then, like, empowering her to be able to tell you more of what she needed and stuff.
And one of the things that we were talking about earlier too, what this does when someone comes to us, or we go to someone else, with a problem, typically we are in more of the amygdala hijack part of the brain. And when we move to someone that is listening to us and then goes to the next phase of asking powerful questions of us and being curious, it literally brings us back into the executive function of the brain. So we're shifting, there's another shift, we're shifting from the emotional charge to the executive function of the brain, that prefrontal cortex, where we can think more logically, and that's where then we can come up with a solution on our own. Because sometimes when someone else is trying to fix it for us, that keeps us in that amygdala hijack area, rather than allowing us to move into the executive function of the brain. So that's a really important part of that shift too.
Yeah, that's great. And you've already kind of mentioned it or hinted at it a little bit.
I keep jumping ahead. I know.
Caught it, but the next step of the Fabulous Five is to practice curiosity and asking those powerful questions. So you've already talked about it a little bit, but do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So the first of the Fabulous Five, when we're looking at making shifts in our conversation, is of course that listening between the lines, and the second is practicing curiosity. So if, Ariel, you and I are having a conversation and I'm genuinely listening, then I want to go to a place of asking you questions for which I have no answer.
Yeah.
That's genuine curiosity, because if I think I have the answer and I'm asking you a question that I already have the answer, then I'm leading you to where I think you should go.
Right.
And so that curiosity is just being really genuinely open. I'm curious about what it is that you're experiencing, what's happening. And in that place of curiosity, it helps to define what the challenge is. And we know that saying, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. So if the questions of curiosity can help bring clarity, it brings clarity first and foremost to you, but then also helps me understand where you're coming from.
Right. Yeah.
So that's that practicing curiosity. And you, even with your daughter, just, honey, what do you need from me right now? Versus assuming you know what she needs.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a powerful little shift.
It is. Powerful little shift. I love it. Just as we go around. Yeah.
And then so the next one is to inspire and embrace critical thinking.
Yeah. And so that's that next phase where once we feel like we've asked these curious questions, now having relationship and trust is foundational. That's very important. Then going to how do we then challenge the person's thought processes so that they can have some critical thinking. So if you don't mind, I'm going to use your example again since you brought that up. So asking your daughter, what do you need from me right now, honey? Well, Mom, I just would like for you to hold me. Now, that's personal. Obviously, that's not going to happen in the professional realm. And then as you're talking with her, asking her what she needs, and then when she's saying this, well, honey, what will that get for you?
Yeah.
That is a challenging question. It's done in a very gentle way, but that's a challenging question. And when we say challenging questions, they're not threatening. The challenging question is to get the other person to critically engage, to get them to think of solutions for themselves rather than us telling by either, and going back to the drama triangle, by either rescuing or persecuting. So instead, we want to coach and challenge so that they can create something different for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, that then shifts, the person's mindset out of that, woe is me, this is so hard, the fear and the emotion of whatever it is they're experiencing, into that executive function of, this is a problem I can solve, or this is a problem I can let go, or what it is that I specifically need in this moment. And sometimes it's, I need more time to think. That was something that you brought up of just, maybe I just need some more time. Okay, when can we check back in again? That was another takeaway that I had from your class of, I think I might be jumping the gun now.
No, that's okay. That's quite all right.
But that was really impactful to me, of just like, okay, well then let's schedule some time to talk about this again, or to revisit whatever it is that you've come up with, and really empowering that person to own whatever the situation is.
Because when we challenge for critical thinking, which is this third stage, we are really getting them to take ownership of what it is. And what do people believe most in? They believe most in what they take ownership of, and where they create a plan, and they're going to be most committed to that if they create that plan versus if we create it for them.
Right, exactly. And just like going through these steps and listening to you all talk about your experiences, like I'm just having kind of like flashbacks of like times where I've had conversations with people, and I was like, if I had asked like different questions or just shifted my mindset and how I approached talking to them, the outcome would have been different. So it's really interesting to just kind of think about situations and see how, small things can really, make an impact and change the outcome of things. So.
And I will give another somewhat of a testimonial, because this was just in a coaching session that I had yesterday. So the client that I was working with has been very intentional to make some shift. And I'm just so pleased with the results that this person has seen, but they took ownership of it. I didn't create it for them. They took ownership of making some shift, and for them, this biggest shift was going in and asking questions. And so we use the analogy with this person, because they would feel when someone would say, and there was a couple of different someones that made them feel this way even more often than others. We know when we feel that resistance, and I use the metaphor of, it feels like ice going down the back. Now, you may not do that, but that's kind of what it feels like when you have that tension with someone. So she was being very intentional with, another colleague, instead of taking that defensive stance, which happened to happen subconsciously, to move to the place of, tell me more. Tell me about how you see that working, going to that curiosity, that place of curiosity, while practicing the listening in between the lines. And then once that rapport was built, they felt like they were collaborating, and this person could then jump to some challenging questions. Well, so how do you see that working? Well, what could be the pitfalls of that? What could be and all of a sudden, before they knew it, they were actually collaborating and working together. And this client was just like ecstatic, because they saw results so quickly from making shift. And this is a colleague that they had challenges with for a long time. And by bringing about these shifts, and that's what this client said, was, we were collaborating. We were actually collaborating. So it works. This shift, we see results quickly.
And that's great that it does turn into a win-win situation. It's not just you feeling good about it, or the other person to answer those deeper questions themselves, but everybody benefits. So.
And Ariel, you just brought up something that's so important. When we grab a hold of these proactive conversations, and we're living in this place of, I love that term that we've trademarked, of conversational oxygen, because in doing that, it does breathe life into the room, and we are creating win-win situations. When we're creating win-lose situations, that's when we're pushing our own agenda forward. And then we can come across as that persecutor in the drama triangle, versus, the coach or the challenger, where do we create the win-win? So that was a good thing to bring up. Good.
And then I think that's kind of bringing into the next step of create partnership.
So that creating partnership is exactly what Leslie was talking about there. So how do we end this conversation? So it's one thing to, to listen, to, practice curiosity, to challenge a person's, thought processes, to get them to critically engage and think, or ourselves. So it can flow both ways. It's not just one person doing it. Hopefully in the conversation, it's both going back and forth with these sorts of, both practicing listening, both being curious, both, to learn where the other person is coming from, to create the win-win. Then how do we end that conversation? How do we create partnership here? So, if you and I were in a conversation like that, so all right, so Leslie, I feel like I understand this, and this, and you share with me what you understand. So what's next for us? And like you said, sometimes that what's next is I need to think a little more about this, but not just leaving it at that.
Yeah.
So we come back and finish up where we left off. So yeah, that's what that partnership is where do we move forward from here now to create, to go back to what you said, to create the win-win. Yeah, together. Yeah.
And then finally, add value.
Yeah. So we end the class with the add value of how, and I call this like the cherry on top. So we could stop right there with the partnership. That's really powerful. But that ending is, how do we give and receive feedback from each other in a very healthy way? And we know if we're only giving negative or developmental feedback, even if it's good, it hurts and hinders relationship. So how do we make sure? So feedback can even be the cherry on top, can be, Leslie, thank you so much. That I know that had to be uncomfortable for you to come to me with that challenge, and I'm so appreciative that you had the courage to bring that to me. Thank you. That right there could be an example of the cherry on top with the feedback.
Great. That's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, that's just a small part, I feel like, of what we're going to be talking about. There's so much more. But as far as the, proactive conversations, we've already kind of given our own testimonials and stuff. But Leslie, I know that you have some really good feedback to share from some people who participated in the class. I would just love to hear a little bit more about.
Absolutely.
Some other people. We have people take surveys after we have the class, because we want to receive feedback and know how we can be better, and what they enjoyed and what they took away from the class. And we have had some really powerful testimonials from some of our clients, including, I believe that every business, no matter how big or small, should have regular coaching. It forces teams to face difficult situations and work collectively to obtain positive solutions. Another one that we got was, the training was fantastic. While I thought I was pretty adept at communicating, I came out of this training with many new tricks to add to my communication.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you had somebody that felt like they were, and probably were already an A communicator, and they felt like, that's that going from good to great. So I feel like I'm already really good at this, and this gave me some skills to be even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making shift happen. That's right.
One client said, I will use the guiding questions, which are some of those challenging questions that we talked about earlier. Immediately, they are exactly the kind of direct takeaway I was looking for from this session. So again, that immediate impact. I think so many times we take trainings and maybe it does help, but it may not help immediately. It may not really be impactful immediately right out of the gate. It may be like, okay, well, the next time I face X, Y, or Z kind of situation, which probably isn't all that common.
Right.
But this can happen immediately, personally or professionally.
It will make a difference in our lives.
Again, someone said this was a wonderful session, helpful both in personal and professional life. I hope we continue to offer these. And, another said, I didn't comprehend how important nonverbal communication is to connecting. This is something I'm going to work hard at improving in my life. You had a really powerful example of nonverbal communication and just, how we interpret the way other people might stand or might listen to, or maybe we perceive that they're not listening to us, and how we can assume things and be completely wrong.
And once we start making up a story in our head, and then that story just takes off, and that's why we spend so much time talking about that foundational element of listening between the lines. So that's the first shift, is we can't even go to the other steps of these fabulous 5 if we can't conquer that first shift of really listening with an open mind. And if I'm listening with bias, or I'm reading between the lines inappropriately, because we also talk a lot in that reading in between the lines, is if you start telling yourself a story stop and ask a curious question.
Yeah.
You know, like, Leslie, I noticed that your arms are folded and you're looking down at the ground. What does that mean to you? Oh, nothing, I'm just cold. You know?
Yeah.
Versus if I didn't ask that, I
Yeah.
think, oh, Leslie's mad and she's not paying any attention to it. So my head starts going in 1,000 different directions. And before I know it, I've convinced myself that Leslie's mad at me or doesn't like what we're talking about or she's not engaged. So
Right.
we just ask curious questions rather than letting our brains do what they do.
Yeah.
And that's tell us a bunch of stories.
Right.
So I love that person brought that stood out to them.
Absolutely. And I would say, you know, for me, it's that we all have people with whom we have a history, you know, and whether good or bad, you know, we make assumptions on how a conversation or a situation is going to go based on that personal or professional history. But immediately when we start assuming that things are going to be, they're doing it because of this reason, they don't like me, they're angry with me or whatever, that taints the whole conversation. You know, from then on, we can't be as open and as questioning and curious as we might be if we allow ourselves to start from a place of asking questions.
Yeah. And you just made me think of something. I know we're running out of time. We need to wrap up. And, you just said something that triggered in my brain. So Joanne taught this class. She and I both teach this proactive conversations class. And I was speaking with the CEO of the organization where she just most recently taught the class. And I was asking him what stood out to him, you know, in the class. And one of the things he said was, you know, one, he was talking about the nonverbals. He talked a lot about the nonverbals. Like, man, I just haven't paid enough attention to that. And the other piece was, and he has re-emphasized this several times in other coaching conversations, he goes, it's not about me. It's not about me. And he said, how many times when something is awkward or uncomfortable or a person's behaving a certain way, do we make it all about us? And 99% of the time, it has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
It's what they're dealing with. It's what they're working through. And so making that mindset shift. And if I'm concerned, then why don't I just curiously ask a question?
Right.
You know, is everything okay? I know, but non-judgmental. That's the thing we've got to make sure when we ask those questions that they're not judgmental.
Right.
So you were mad at me yesterday in the meeting. That's very assuming, you know, versus just being curious. Yeah. Was it, you know, it seemed like something was going on yesterday when you had, you know, when your arms were folded and you were looking at the ground. So it can either be in the moment or reflected back. But yeah, shifting our mindset to those assumptions and those biases so we don't live into that is powerful.
Exactly. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for sharing those testimonials and, you know, hearing what other people had to say. And we would love to hear, you know, your comments and like your thoughts about our conversation today. So please leave us some comments about experiences you've had or some aha moments. We would love to hear from you guys. And
tell us how you're making shift happen.
Yeah.
What are you doing in life, personally or professionally? What tips do you have? How do you make these mindset shifts? Because it begins with the mind before anything else begins to shift. So we would love, thank you for saying that. We'd love to hear what you're doing and what's working, what's not. And if we can help you personally through coaching, if we can help you organizationally through some of these trainings, we spent a lot of time today focusing on, you know, shift through this one proactive conversations class, but there's lots of ways to embrace shift personally, professionally, individually, or organizationally.
And if you want more information on that, you can email us at info@msbcoach.com or visit our website, msbcoach.com. Is there anything you guys want to say to wrap up on, you know, getting shift done?
I just want to say, one, Ariel, and you've been with us for a little over a year now, and you always just amaze me with how well and graciously you lead these. So I want to say thank you for that. And Leslie being so new on our team and just jumping right in. I don't know if you jumped in or if we threw you in, but nonetheless you swam. And just so grateful to have you, and thank you, one, for being such a crucial part, a new part of our team, and for just what you shared today. That was so meaningful that you shared. And vulnerability, as Braden Brown says, vulnerability is the key to connection.
Absolutely.
So you shared stories in real life of how this shift has impacted you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, you guys, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, join us next time.
All right, bye bye.